thank you so much for joining me. You're down under at the moment, aren't you?
I am indeed. I'm in sunny Australia. Well, it's sunny where I am in South Australia. It's not so sunny in Sydney, but yeah, I'm enjoying a couple of Northern Hemisphere winter months down here in Australia.
Fantastic, brilliant. So, I'm going to get right to it because anybody listening to this wants to know about Formula One. This is, it's exciting. It's exciting and it's sexy and we love it. And you've worked with some of the greatest Formula One world champions. So, what defines them? What is their ability to become the best in the world?
There's no question that they have to have talent, and like anyone who's successful in business, you have to have a degree of talent and application. But then they go a big step further, and that big step is the work ethic that they put into really honing those skills and then applying themselves as leaders within a team. And it's something that I worked very briefly with Ayrton Senna at the beginning of my career, and then I met and worked with Michael Schumacher, and more recently with Lewis Hamilton. And these are giants of the industry, and they all are superbly talented. But it is really interesting that work ethic comes across, and it's not something that the sports media ever really see, because it's something that's within the team, and it's really only people inside the team who get to see the way in which they apply themselves every day of the week, 52 weeks of the year. So a huge work ethic and work rate. Of course, each one is slightly different. Michael Schumacher could apply himself almost 24/7. Lewis Hamilton really enjoys getting away from it all periodically and having a complete break from Formula One, and then he comes back fresh and invigorated. So it's different things for different people, but the thing they all have in common is this formidable work ethic. And then the leadership aspect, it comes down, and I think I've observed it really very much firsthand, is when all of these talents come into Formula One, and perhaps I was even like that, we all think that we are going to be the best, we're going to be the greatest. It's all about ourselves. And then after quite a short time, you see the realization dawn that to be successful in Formula One, as to be successful in business, it's about the team of people. It's about the sum of the parts. And the great drivers recognize that sooner than others, and they begin to apply themselves as leaders to the business. I did an event with Lewis Hamilton just before the pandemic, and he talked about this for about 10 minutes on stage, around the fact that he realizes that even his demeanor when he comes into the office or comes into the factory or turns up at the racetrack, his demeanor has an effect on the team. So he realized at an early stage that he is regarded by the team as a leader, and therefore he has an opportunity to inspire, he has an opportunity to sort of inculcate the right approach, so that those leadership qualities suddenly start to make themselves felt. And I think that's, again, been one of my big takeaways from working with these guys who are super successful in Formula One. It's them really understanding it's about teamwork, it's a people business. And the final thing I'll say is that as individuals, they are just never satisfied with their own performance. They always know there's a little bit more to come. And there's this relentless enthusiasm for improving performance. And what they do is they apply that to themselves first, but they then export that to the whole team. And they ask the team to focus on constantly improving. How can we keep improving performance? So this whole iterative process of continuous improvement is something that they have built into them, and they then export it to the wider team. So you add all of those things together, the work ethic, the application of their leadership qualities within the team, the focus on improvement. Ultimately, they just reach the top of the tree in Formula One, and that's why they become world champions. So very interesting to see that although they're different personalities, they've got these very similar traits.
That's really interesting, that because that it works so well in business as well. If you've got that really strong work ethic, and if you become the leader and you appreciate the team is so important, and that you are never satisfied with what you've achieved. You've got that, you almost become obsessed, don't you, with that continuous improvement. I think that is fascinating. And as you say, we don't really see that. We see the glamour of the race, and you don't see everything else that goes on behind it, and that work ethic thing, that's really interesting. And the difference that you shared there between Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton, and I'm thinking, who am I more Lewis Hamilton or am I more Schumacher? I don't know. I think I'm a bit in between, but no, it's brilliant. Although I'm not allowed to drive like either of them on the road. Mark, so you've talked about team, and team is really, really important. And businesses often like to bring speakers who have a sports background to talk about teams. But what's the difference when we're talking about teams with regards to Formula One? How do they sustain high performance? And what is different about the whole Formula One setup?
Well, Marie, as you say, businesses love drawing upon sport and using the powerful analogies of teamwork and even individual performance in sport. So I understand that very well. I shared many a stage with rugby players and football coaches and people from lots of other sports. What makes Formula One different, and the business community definitely recognizes this, is that our teams are very large, up to 1,000 full-time members of a team. In fact, one or two teams even larger than that. And see, we've got a great many people. Less than 10% of our employees travel to the races. So 90% of our staff are working in a factory where we're essentially a technology business. And I think businesses love the fact that a Formula One racing team is first and foremost a technology business, which is a research and development intensive business. We manufacture something, we bring a product to market. It happens to be a Formula One car, but I can promise you, over the years, talking to companies in all kinds of areas of business, the fact that we produce something really resonates for them. So that's a very powerful story. And I think therefore the teamwork for us is not confined to what people see on television or streaming on a device. It's not the pit crew in the pit lane, although that's a very powerful story of teamwork. For us, that's the tip of the iceberg. Actually, the teamwork starts many months and indeed years beforehand, when we conceive the car back at base and we design this incredibly complex piece of technology and bring it to market. So the teamwork is from top to bottom and left to right of the organization. Formula One teams are quite big, complex businesses to run. So businesses are really interested in how do we then build a high performance team, not amongst 11 football players or, but amongst 1,000 people. How do you get that? So it comes down to, of course, having great leadership. It comes down to having a team of people who are fully aligned behind what the organization is trying to achieve. And in working at Red Bull Racing, and more recently spending time talking to people like Toto Wolff and James Allison at Mercedes-Benz Formula One, who have been dominating Formula One in recent years, what really comes across is that they create a framework within which a team of people benefit from a high degree of psychological safety. They are able to be open and honest and transparent with one another. There's no fear factor. There's no blame culture. If there's a challenge, it's a challenge which the whole organization sets out at overcoming. And the flip side of this, Maria, is that when I then have observed and met and indeed talked to senior executives in uncompetitive Formula One teams, you find the opposite is the case. You find that there is a fear factor. Maybe the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the business are not communicating that effectively. There's tension in the business. There's perhaps a little bit of blame culture going on, which is always very destructive. So we know from experience within Formula One what works. We also know what doesn't work. And to sustain that high performance, you need a highly engaged group of people who really believe in the leadership and in the ambition that the company has, and who share in that and bring the very best of themselves to the table. And if you can unlock that kind of passion for everyone in the organization to be pulling in the same direction, not against one another, but all trying to beat the competition, that's a very, very powerful thing. And I've mentioned also the competition. And I think this is something which when I talk to businesses, they're really fascinated by, which is that in Formula One, we want to be the best team we can be because we have these 9 competitors who we know are packed full of smart, clever people, all trying to create a better product and to beat us. So there's an intense competitive nature to what we do. And we know that if we don't have the right values and behaviors in our team, we know we're giving the opposition the opportunity that to adopt those and to beat us. So it becomes all about focusing the team on how can we go from being a good team to being a great team? How can we unlock the potential that exists in all of those great people who work for us? And in the case of Formula One, there's no doubt that in the last decade, my former team at Red Bull Racing and then the Mercedes-Benz team at Lewis Hamilton, those are the teams who've gotten the people factor right. And as a result of getting the teamwork flowing, they have just, quite frankly, shown a clean pair of heels or wheels, should I say, to the opposition.
I love that. I love the fact also that, you know, Formula One is not just about the sport. It is it's a technology company. It's a technology business rather, and it's also, producing products. And it's it's fascinating, really fascinating. I know that obviously businesses will be thinking they've been through a lot of change and a lot of transformation, and Formula One as well has been through a lot of change and transformation. Can you give me some of the examples that you've had to face and explain how you've managed the lessons and how you've then interpreted them and applied them to your business audiences?
Well, the first thing to say, Maria, is that I've been speaking about Formula One for 20 years. So just standing in front of the mirror, I see change and transformation every day of the week. And we've all changed enormously over the years. And I'm really struck by the way my industry has changed. And it's all changed for good. And I'm actually more excited about my industry and about Formula One today in 2022 than I've ever been. I mean, it's going from strength to strength. We have faced some really existential challenges. And I think everyone in the world at the moment knows what that feels like, because the pandemic felt like an existential challenge to so many businesses. But that was only the latest in a series of major challenges for Formula One. Our business model underwent major changes in the early part of this century. If we go back 20 years ago, we moved from a business model entirely reliant on sponsorship to beginning to change that, shift away. Sponsorship became almost commoditized, and suddenly we were on a race to the bottom in terms of margins and profitability against thousands of other sports in the world. So we've seen some really big changes occur, which means we've had to really reinvent ourselves. What is it that we're good at? What is it that our customers want? Indeed, who are our customers? Reevaluating all of that. So Formula One teams have had to really change how they do business, who they do business with, and effectively repurpose themselves. Where are we actually driving value? Because as you said in your introduction, Formula One is seen from the outside as being in a very sexy, glamorous sport. From the inside, it's rather more mundane. We run in a business that's very expensive to run. It has to make money. We have got to look after the bottom line. We've got to be profitable. We've got to invest in our future. And as a result, the stresses and strains that our business models have been under needed resolution. We needed to find a future. And so that's really a story that I love sharing, and how we did that over the last, particularly the last 15 years. And I mentioned the fact that it's about playing to your core strengths. What is it that we as a business do that really adds value? Where can we add value to our customers? How can we innovate, be creative? And so Formula One has really learned how to do business in a lot of quite unique ways in recent years. Two examples: my former rivals at McLaren and Williams, they both set up diversified technology companies working in aerospace, renewable energy, working in defense, working in, believe it or not, energy efficiency programs. I myself, when I was running the Cosworth Formula One engine business, got involved in defense applications for Formula One technology, got involved in aerospace applications for our technology. So what we were doing there was really taking a step back and saying, well, our core capability here is not motor racing. Our core capability is impressive technology solutions which we can bring to market in record time and do so at the highest quality possible, and of course great performance, and clients just love that. So we've been through a lot of major shifts in our business model over the years, and then of course along came COVID, and that led to another transformation, because the last 2 years have tested the resilience of all businesses, and Formula One, quite frankly, looked like it might be on its knees when the pandemic began. How could we travel in the world? How could we have something called a world championship? And yet somehow we managed to do that. And again, we did that by having the agility to adjust, to play to our strengths, to focus on the things that we can control rather than the things that we had no control over. So yes, Formula One became a more predominantly European championship in the last 2 years, with some events in slightly further places, but certainly not the long haul venues that we used to enjoy. I think really interestingly, we pivoted online, and just as we're recording this interview online, Formula One pivoted online. Well, how did we do that? Well, we did that by embracing the world of esports and computer gaming and having virtual world championship events. And in doing that, lo and behold, we have transformed our business, because we've engaged with younger audiences who we were struggling to engage with previously. And we've had an acceleration and growth in all of our global audiences during the pandemic. It's been an extraordinary example of the fact that sometimes these major challenges that come over the horizon are an extremely useful way of making you innovate and being creative. And it poses the question, why weren't we doing more of that anyway? So why did it take a pandemic for us to respond in that way? But as a result, Formula One in 2022 is a very different beast than it was in 2019. And it's very exciting. We have new pillars, new vertical pillars in terms of profitability and growth of the business. And again, the lesson is, all about adaptability, playing to your core strengths, and recognizing that when these major business challenges appear, they appear for everyone. It's not unique to your business. And so if you're the one who's prepared to meet that challenge head on, to develop innovative solutions, work with that powerful team that I talked about a few moments ago, it's amazing what can be unlocked. And as a result, you come out the far side a far better, brighter, and more resilient business than you were before.
I can hear the passion. I really can, Mark. I've known you for a long time. I've known you for the 20 years. I mean, I remember you talking about the sponsorship, because I've known you for 25 years, I think now. And I can hear the passion. It's really ignited in you. It's wonderful. And I never would have considered the idea of bringing Formula One to, online. Wow. I mean, fantastic, amazing things. And I also like what you said early on about change for good. And I think all of the change that Formula One has made in the last 20 years, 25 years that I've known you, has definitely been for good. It's been incredible. You touched on digital transformation. What does that look like? Is there more digital transformation going on that we're not seeing in Formula One, or what does it look like at the moment?
So a driver such as Lewis Hamilton or world champion Max Verstappen can realistically expect to go into a Formula One season and not suffer a single reliability problem. So we are designing high-end technology that's robust and reliable. So quality of outcomes has really been revolutionized by this digital transformation. We then have a third outcome, which is to do with energy efficiency. And it's a story that Formula One has not perhaps done that good a job at selling, but it's something that I enjoy talking to my audiences about, which is that we're in a world now where resources are scarce. We've got to make the most of what we have available. Indeed, we've got to move away from finite resources. So energy efficiency has become a key word in Formula One. And we currently have the most energy efficient engines in the world. And indeed, we're only 4 years away from abandoning using fossil fuels altogether. So again, our digital technologies have enabled us to do a lot more with a lot less. So energy efficiency has become, again, a really interesting outcome. And we are seeing technologies in Formula One today that, quite frankly, Maria, no one would have thought possible just 10 years ago. Artificial intelligence playing a key role in helping us to develop solutions that we previously really would have struggled with. And then the final thing, and perhaps the most obvious, is the fact that today in Formula One, our cars are the highest performing Formula One cars we've ever seen. So we've got great performance, we've got energy efficiency, we've got robust, reliable solutions, and we've got a very safe sport. And the digital technologies have all played a key role in helping us to achieve those outcomes. So it's for me, a very powerful story of transformation, of really changing the face of our business and making us move into a very different place and a much better place today than at any point in the sport's 72-year history.
You know what? I wish that everybody had those kinds of high standards, especially technical reliability. People won't know, but during this podcast, we've had 2 major technical challenges, and it's like, seriously, we've been virtual now for 2 years. Let's have the technology be reliable. So thank goodness we weren't driving a Formula One car, Mark, but nobody noticed. We're so professional. So I'd like to finish to talk about you've written your 3rd book, which is amazing. And your 3rd book focuses on how important diversity and inclusion in Formula One is, which I never really put the 2 together, but I'm glad to say that it has become an important topic. Talk to me about that. Tell me about how you've handled that topic and how Formula One is dealing with DEI. That's
Yeah.
DEI.
Well, we're recording this podcast on International Women's Day, and hashtag break the bias. And in Formula One, I would love to tell you that we all woke up one morning about 20 years ago and decided we needed to simply go out and employ more women. It was slightly more complicated than that, because the first thing that really began to change was a recognition that we were short of engineers. And when we started looking at engineering as a discipline, we were finding very few school children were coming into engineering. Universities were struggling. And actually, it was only boys who were predominantly, I'm slightly exaggerating, but it was mainly guys who were coming into engineering. And it was certainly only guys who were applying for engineering jobs in Formula One. So purely from a business perspective, we realized half the population wasn't even considering a career in a technology business like Formula One. So going back 20 years ago, we started initiatives such as Formula One in schools, which targets 7 to 17-year-old schoolboys and schoolgirls and introduces them to the STEM subjects and shows them that engineering is not boring. It can be incredibly exciting. And of course, in the case of Formula One, we want to generate young engineers who come and work for us rather than work for British Aerospace or Rolls-Royce or Jaguar Land Rover or other areas of industry. So it all really started with the desire to get men and women, boys and girls interested in engineering and coming to work in Formula One. And then we began to move into a number of other areas. First of all, there was a growing recognition that to be a successful team in Formula One, you needed a group of people who were extremely creative, innovative, looking for competitive advantage over the competition. And you tend not to get that when you employ a very like-minded group of people. So basically in Formula One, we were having a bunch of predominantly white European guys all working together in Formula One teams. And surprise, surprise, often repeating the same mistakes and really indulging in groupthink. And as we have diversified our teams, more men and women, people from different cultures coming to work in Formula One, we began to see the strengths of that. Now, whenever we had our conversation a few months ago about how digital transformation had helped us to transform safety in Formula One, another thing that has helped to transform safety in Formula One is getting rid of those, quite frankly, old, tired male teams with a lot of the negative behaviors that comes from a purely male environment. Bringing more women into the workplace has really changed the dynamic in the teams. It's made for a much more creative, innovative, caring environment where people actually want to help each other. So the dynamic within teams has really changed as we have embarked upon this diversification strategy over the last 20 years. And then if you move to the last 5 years, since Formula One was taken over by Liberty Media, the American company, there's been an overt determination to make Formula One a much more diverse and inclusive industry. In fact, after we record this podcast, I'm speaking to a multinational company about the diversification strategies which Formula One is currently employing. And every team in Formula One has bought into that because all of the leaders recognize the power of having a team that actually reflects the society that you work in, and indeed the customer base that you serve. It's actually completely nonsensical for a team of people not to reflect the society that they operate in. So there are a lot of initiatives at the moment, and we will add inclusion to that because, as many observers will know only too well, in Formula One we have this formidable talent called Lewis Hamilton, who has won 7 world championship titles and is the first black Formula One driver, and has challenged our industry to be much more inclusive, and is now leading and indeed pioneering some wonderful programs with his team at Mercedes-Benz to bring people of color and people from black communities and people from communities who perhaps wouldn't normally get the opportunity to even consider working in Formula One, actually to have that chance, to have scholarships and apprenticeships and programs to work in the sport. And this is having, of course, an enormously beneficial effect on our businesses, because not only is it good for our teams to be diverse and inclusive, creative and innovative, it's actually good for our business to be seen by society to be contributing in a positive way towards reaching out to groups of people who very often are being passed by and overlooked. And I've spent some time mentoring school children as part of these programs. And I can tell you, Maria, it is so motivational and so inspiring to have a group of 11 or 12-year-olds stand up in front of you and give you a presentation about why they want to become engineers, boys and girls, seeking to come and work in Formula One. It's, for me, that's, as I move towards the end of my career, a really powerful takeaway from the change and transformation that's occurred within the industry. One final thing I'll say to you is that under FAQs in presentations that I give, I would say probably once a month for the last 25 years, someone has asked me, when are we going to see a woman Formula One driver? So when I talk about diversity and inclusion, you can imagine this naturally becomes the next question. And the good news is that we now have a number of initiatives to bring women into motor racing as professional drivers. My associate, David Coulthard, a former Formula One driver, he's chairman of the All-Women W Series Championship. And that is now a major support series to Formula One. And there's so much momentum behind that, that I'm quite confident that before I hang my hat up in Formula One, we will see a full-time female Formula One driver within the next 3 to 5 years. And that's going to be a very powerful message to women and to girls all over the world, because the one thing that we do know from our experience in Formula One is that when people have a role model, it really helps them and inspires them to mimic that and to achieve those self-same kind of targets and ambitions. So we're on a very good trajectory at the moment. Still some way to go, but Formula One's determined that the teams will reflect the society that we serve.
If only I were a lot younger and I could do that. Oh my goodness, how wonderful. What a shame. Anyway, Mark, thank you so much for your resilience in this episode. Thank you for the incredible content and value you've brought us. I hope it hasn't been too painful.
Thank you so much, Maria. Pleasure to talk with you.
Wonderful. And thank you everybody for listening to The Speaker Show. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, and you can keep up with future episodes on the Speakers Associates website, which is speakersassociates.com, or your favorite podcast app. Go and grab a copy of The Business of Winning: Transformation from the Formula One Track to the Boardroom by Mark Gallagher. And if you would like to invite Mark to speak at your next conference or event, please get in touch with Speakers Associates in good time to book him, so you won't be disappointed, because he might be somewhere else in the world and you need him with you. Take care, and I will see you all next week. Thank you.